Hello and welcome back to the Kijagold Podcast. This is I, Kijagold, the one and only. Any other one is a counterfeit. If this is your first time seeing my podcast on TikTok, welcome. This is my podcast, the Kijagold Podcast, like I already said, where I talk about whatever topics or whatever I want to talk about pretty much. And yeah, this is episode 2 of the podcast. For episode 1, I talked about being black in Poland, basically just highlighting racism in Poland. And for episode 2, I'll be talking about toxicity. So the reason why I chose this topic to talk about in general is because I myself have been toxic, I'm not gonna lie, and I found myself in multiple toxic situations and relationships, and I know a lot of people are gonna relate to this. I just wanted to talk about toxicity in general, and the first thing I just wanted to point out is that I myself have been toxic. How do I know? I realized that a lot of toxic behaviors that people actually exhibit are learned behaviors. It's not things that you just do because you came up with it. It's learned. And while just getting out of depression and really thinking about my past and why I was even depressed in the first place, I realized that I grew up in a very toxic environment. I didn't even realize how toxic it was until I left. And a lot of those things I carried with me, like the things that I learned from or saw, that I thought was normal with me. Pettiness in general is just one of the most toxic traits that people have and something that I had. And I'm trying to work on it right now. Actually, what I do is that I learn to forgive for myself, not for people, because forgiveness, you will think that is something, oh, I'm just forgiving because, the person's asking for forgiveness. No, sometimes the people don't even ask, but you need to forgive, or I forgive because I know that when I keep negative energy or negativity inside of me, it attracts negative energy and it limits me from actually being able to, you know, achieve anything positive or even be positive in general. And people wouldn't even like to hang out with people that are just negative anyway. So I forgive for myself, not for them. I forgive people for my own mental health. And that's how I was able to, through forgiveness, meaning like forgiving people for myself and not for them, I was able to learn how to not be so petty and not hold things in and hold grudges for so long, because sometimes these grudges will eat you up. And in general, pettiness is one of the most toxic behaviors that people exhibit, is including me. Another toxic behavior that people exhibit is just like, I don't know how to explain this. When people can't just say that they don't like something, and instead of saying it, they start to act different, if you know what I mean. I don't know if there's a word for this, but that is very toxic. And yeah, that's just that. We're gonna just leave that there. I'm gonna talk about something else next. Mental manipulation is one thing that parents are very guilty of doing, especially Gen X, boomers, baby boomers. They are so guilty of doing these things. I don't think millennial parents do this a lot. But you know how when a child tells the parents, okay, mom, I don't like that you did this to me. And the mom goes, oh, are you trying to say I'm a bad mother? What exactly does that mean? Like, that is manipulation on the highest form. And when you do that to a child, you are literally making a toxic person. Because that person will grow up and think that that's a normal behavior and do that to other people and ruin a lot of relationships in their lives because of that one act of mental manipulation that parent thinks is okay because they want to get some kind of validation from the child that they're a good parent. Another toxic behavior that I used to have, I still do have it, is not being able to accept help from people or even ask for help. Why I was going just deep in my thoughts and just really just trying to decipher where most of my depressive problems, like I'm my own personal therapist, to be honest. And I found out that The reason why I'm always unable, or I used to be unable to accept help or gifts or ask for help from people, was because growing up, people never really helped me. And when I asked for help, people never helped me. It was crazy. Like, when I found that, I figured that out, I was so flabbergasted, if you want to say, because I didn't even realize how much one trait or one character was so linked to my childhood and childhood toxicity. And childhood toxicity, and what I mean by childhood toxicity is like just a child growing up in a toxic environment. And just being able to say this right now is even really hard, because it's something that I was not able to admit, that I was like a child that grew up in a toxic environment. But growing up in a place where I was constantly the one that people were always like, you do this, you do this, you do this. And when I asked for help, no help was given. Like, I'm not saying this is all the time, but I'm saying that there's amount of trauma from asking for help and not getting it that has affected me in my life today, that I can't even accept help from people. I have to do everything myself, because I honestly can't even tell you the reason, but I can tell you that it comes from trauma, and that trauma comes from toxicity. It's crazy. Another form of toxicity that people don't even, like, people fail to acknowledge is narcissism. Narcissism is one of the worst forms of toxicity that I have ever seen. Like, if you watch Blue Therapy, you will see a prime example, Paul. That is a narcissist. That is somebody that is constantly the victim in every situation. They can never acknowledge other people's emotions, because their emotions come first no matter what. I don't know. I would say at a point I used to be a narcissist, because I didn't even used to validate a lot of people's emotions, because mine was first. But as an empath, I think, like, I had to channel my empathy even more to be able to adapt and understand other people's emotions more, and be able to, like, just not seek validation as a victim from anybody. That's like how Paul on Blue Therapy being my prime example of narcissism reminds me of a lot of people that I know. A lot of people that I have met in my life, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people can relate. Just me being someone that just can't take rubbish, and just, I don't have the patience for bullshit. I've been able to get out of, like, a lot of situationships and relationships that the person is a narcissist. But what if the narcissist was your family member? What if the narcissist is somebody you know? Somebody that you can't get rid of? I know a person. I know people like that. And it shocked me to my core when I actually realized that that person was a narcissist, because I was talking about my own emotions. I was talking about the pain that I was going through. And guess what? The person said that I want to always make myself a victim. Why? Because I am talking about my feelings. Let me give you a scenario where you that is watching right now, imagine if you were the kind of person that doesn't really talk about your emotions, and you don't really address things that people do to you because you are empathetic and you really don't want to be stressed. And then finally you were able to address something that happened to you, and that person tells you that you're a narcissist for telling them that they did something wrong to you, and that you're sucked up in your head and you live in your own world. Who is the narcissist? Tell me. Definitely that person. Because the fact that that person wants to make himself the victim in that situation, even though it's not his emotions at stake, that makes a person a narcissist. That's literally what describes a narcissist. They would never acknowledge that the other person, their partner or their family or whoever, has emotions too and can be hurt too. Do you understand? It's crazy to me. There's even once that I was in a friendship with somebody, and that the person was very toxic, and that person went around and was telling people that I am toxic. You can imagine that person. I literally told her, to be vague, that her toxicity was enabling my toxicity, because I knew that I have toxic tendencies, knowing the way that I grew up, knowing that I was brought up around toxic people and toxic energies. I know I can be toxic. I know that. And I told her that your toxic behaviors are enabling mine, so I'm going to back off. But she went to go tell people that I am toxic and I've been the toxic one the whole time. Meanwhile, she was gaslighting me, lying to me, stabbed me in the back 3 times, and I forgave that person. I have to get myself out of that situation ASAP because you can imagine what I was going through. Forgiving over and over again. It hurts to forgive, and then still get hurt over and over again. And that's why if you check the first few videos that I talked about just now, like I just posted before this one, I literally mentioned that I learned to forgive for myself, not for people. That's something I learned, like, to get me out of toxic situations, because I was forgiving people for them, not for me. I was forgiving them because, okay, they wouldn't even apologize and I'll forgive them and then I'll be waiting for them to change. Meanwhile, they never even acknowledge that they did something wrong. So I started to forgive people for myself, so I don't have to harbor any stupid negative hatred inside of me that will make me attract even more negative people or negative energy around myself. And it's just basically something that I learned just along the way of living the life of toxicity in general. And yeah, if you apply that, it will help, trust me. I'm getting really passionate about this topic because a lot of these scenarios are really dear to me, and in a lot of cases I have found myself being the toxic one, and I've never failed to acknowledge it. There's something about me that I really like is that I acknowledge my faults quickly. And I know it's just nitpicky tendencies, judging myself, but it helped me to identify my problems and start trying to fix or start trying to learn how to be better before anybody else. And because of that, I was able to, identify other people's toxicities and toxic behaviors quickly, and a lot of the time I don't even find myself in that kind of situations anymore. I think there are actually more things that are toxic. I just don't even want to start going into it, seriously. So to round up this podcast, because I don't want to start crying, I just want to say a few things. If you find yourself in a toxic situation, and if you're in a toxic relationship right now, it is toxic. Get out and go focus on yourself, because that's something I had to learn too. Sometimes you find yourself just being there because you don't know anything other than toxic. For me, just because I was growing up around toxicity a lot, most of my relationships were toxic because I couldn't function normally in the normal, proper functioning relationship. But after staying single for a couple of years, I realized it's way better than being in any relationship or any situationship that will be ruining my own mental health. Don't let yourself get drained. Get out. Now is the time. Seriously. Trust. Speaking of toxicity, I just wanted to say, it's not just relationships that are toxic. Even friendships are toxic. Even family members are toxic. And if you are in any of those kind of situations, and you can't find a way out of it, just get out when you can and rely on people that actually care, because most of these things are not relevant for life. At the end of the day, you have to live your life for yourself, because what else is the point? You understand? Why waste life like that when you didn't even ask to be here, but then now you're here? So now you have to fucking do something about it and live life and enjoy it before it's over. Because what else is the point? So why will you be stuck in a toxic family, toxic relationship, when there's so much more you can be doing with your life? Just saying.